Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brothers and sisters, welcome to this live broadcast from the IMAN Center in Kirkland. Today is the 5th Muharram in the year 1442 after Hijri and August 24th, Monday. We've received some very sad news from Najaf. Our dear sister Firdos's brother passed away. He was battling coronavirus for the last 10 days, and we received the news early this morning that he passed away and was buried earlier today in Najaf. We request everyone to remember the marhum with Salat al-Wahshat after your Maghribain today if possible. And our program today will begin with the recitation of Surah Yasin. I'm going to request Brother Kareem to lead us in the recitation of Surah Yasin.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم ما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you, Brother Karim, for that beautiful recitation of Surah Yasin. Let us remember Marhum Abdul Hadi Al-Turfi with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Those of you who have joined us and have not kept up with the email, we are very sad to announce the passing of Brother Abdul Hadi Al-Turfi, the older brother of Sister Firdaus, brother-in-law, Brother Karim. He was admitted into the hospital a day ago and he's been battling COVID-19 coronavirus, and sadly he was not able to make it and he has left us in this world. We pray for his soul to rest in peace, eternal peace with Allah's choicest servants, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all the dear ones find solace and strength to bear the separation. He was only 62 years old. Brothers and sisters, this disease that we are fighting, the pandemic, is pretty serious virus, and there is sad news coming, and it's really hard to bear. We have to stand strong and we have to support each other, inshallah. Today is the 5th of Muharram. We continue our program for this Mahe Muharram, and we will proceed here with the recitation of the Quran for the passages that were chosen for today.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل من رب السماوات والأرض قل الله قل أفاتخذتم
Yeah, so far so good.
من دونه أولياء
This the video was Karim Uncle's video was cut off.
يملكون لأنفسهم نفعا ولا ضرا قل هل يستوي الأعمى والبصير أم هل تستوي الظلمات والنور أم جعلوا لله شركاء خلقوا كخلقه فتشابه الخلق عليهم قل الله خالق كل شيء وهو الواحد القهار أنزل من السماء ماء فسالت أودية بقدرها فاحتمل السيل زبدا رابيا ومما يوقدون عليه في النار ابتغاء حلية أو متاع زبد مثله كذلك يضرب الله الحق والباطل فأما الزبد فيذهب جفاء وأما ما ينفع الناس فيمكث في الأرض كذلك يضرب الله الأمثال للذين استجابوا لربهم الحسنى والذين لم يستجيبوا له لو أن لهم ما في الأرض جميعا ومثله معه لافتدوا به أولئك لهم سوء الحساب ومأواهم جهنم وبئس المهاد صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Surah Al-Ra'd, verses 16 to 18. In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. Say, Prophet, who is Lord of the heavens and the earth? Say, God. Say, why do you take protectors other than Him who can neither benefit nor harm even themselves? Say, are the blind equal to those who can see? And are the depths of darkness equal to light? Have the partners they assign to God created anything like His creation, so that their creation is indistinguishable from His? Say, God is the creator of all things, He is the one, the all-compelling. He sends water from the sky that fills riverbeds to overflowing each according to its measure. The stream carries on its surface a growing layer of froth, like the froth that appears when people melt metals in the fire to make ornaments and tools. In this way, God illustrates truth and falsehood. The froth disappears, but what is of benefit to man stays behind. This is how God makes illustrations. There will be the best of rewards for those who respond to their Lord. Those who do not respond would willingly give away the earth's contents twice over, and if they had, in order to ransom themselves, so terrible will be their reckoning. Hell will be their home, and their bed wretched. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim.
Brothers and sisters, we now continue with the Marthiyah for today.
Bar Muhammad Ali Muhammad Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. सितारों की आमद है काली घटा में सरोही का आलम है मौजे خبر لائے ہیں پیک اہل جفا میں کہ دو شیر آتے ہیں دشتے رہیں سیدھی تلواریں منہ مڑ رہے ہیں پروں کو جماؤں کے ہوش اڑ رہے ہیں سفارا ستم کے رسالے ہوئے ہیں نیاموں سے خنجر نکالے بلند اس طرف رن میں بھالے ہوئے ہیں یہاں دل کو زینب سنبھالے مسلح پہ جنگ فرما رہی ہے کمر دونوں بیٹوں کی بندھوا رہی ہوئے دونوں زیجا ستاجا بنے خوب دولہا پکارے دعا چپ کے یہ کرتی تھی زینب سرفراز ہوا شہادت سے نثارے شہنے خو کے آئے میرے سامنے سرخ رو ہو کے آئے یہ فرما کے فرمایا سنتے ہو واری دکھاتی ہیں اب دل کو باتیں سدھارو سدھارو منگاؤ سواری نہ ڈر نہ لگے جب کوئی زخم کاری لڑو یوں कहें सब सितम करने वाले, लड़ाई नहीं है नए लड़ने वाले, सितारों की आमद। बर मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद सलावत। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद।
Once again, Brother Mansoor, Ali and Hamza, thank you very much for the continued recitation of the beautiful Matthias. You know, I make it a point to listen again after the recording because I find it so moved. And when I'm running this program here, I don't really get the chance to immerse so much. So I really appreciate what you're doing for us, and may Allah give you extra strength in the times ahead. Now it's time for us to invite our guest speaker to address us for tonight. And I'm so thankful to Sayyid Hassan Rizvi for raising a very beautiful topic about identity. And I'm sure that this topic is provoking a lot of thinking amongst many of us. Some of us may not agree with him or may not even understand him. Or certainly we don't share his complete context. And ideas, when we try to decode them within our own context, may not really come across as they were intended. So everybody tries to encode using the context, they decode using the context, and sometimes the encoding and decoding buffers are not the same, and we don't really understand. And as the Sayyid was saying yesterday, that we need to actually have a back and forth discussion to get to really true understanding. And at the end of the day, we may also arrive at a different perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that. Islamic tradition has got a great legacy of scholars respectfully disagreeing, yet continuing to cooperate on things that matter. But this issue of identity is very important. I remember I had gone for my Hajj in 2006, and I was traveling with a group of people from all over North America, and I asked them, where are you from? And they said, I'm from Iran, or I'm from Afghanistan, I'm from Iraq. And when I was asking them, but where are you coming from right now? Well, I'm coming from Oklahoma, or I'm coming from Toronto. And how long have you been living there? They said, I've been living there 30, 40 years. So, the identity they were still retaining was their ethnic identity. And some of them may not even have been to the country of origin. For example, we have Iraqi refugees here in Seattle, who say, who are you? Well, I'm Iraqi. Well, actually, the person was born in the United States. He's never been to Iraq. He's of Iraqi parents. So, this issue of identity is something that everybody will struggle with. Everybody will have to deal with. But the issue comes down to the culture and traditions. It so happens that when we come to commemorate Muharram, everybody feels comfortable to go to their islands of familiarity when it comes to cultures and traditions, rather than come and find a platform around which we can all come together and observe, as I was saying. In a discussion I was having with one of our Iranian brothers just before Muharram, say, look, we the recent immigrants to this country are not the first wave of immigrants. There have been Germans and Italians and French and Irish and all kinds of Eastern Europeans, people who've come to America from Africa too. Yet they don't have their ethnic identity anymore, and they have a new identity assumed. So one of the challenges we have is, coming together, and the gatherings of Muharram give us an opportunity to form a shared context. And this is why I'm so thankful to Sayyid Hassan Rizvi to raise this topic of identity. And he's quite correct that, in a lecture, which is a form of a monologue, we cannot really get to the bottom of it. So I was suggesting to him and also to the program committee that perhaps on Saturday or on Friday, the 28th of August, the day before Ashura, in the 1 hour that we have arranged with him, perhaps we can actually have a fruitful back and forth. It will also be a culmination of his lectures by that time, and we can engage with him and really get to the bottom of this issue. Not to the bottom, but at least try to dig a little bit more deeper into the issue of identity and values and culture. So with this, I'd like to now invite our guest speaker to address us for tonight. Please welcome him with loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa barakatuhu.
We're continuing our discussion in our series that we've now shown the title for, which is called From Muslim to Mu'min. And the basis, now that it's been identified last night, is that we are trying to go from a place of simply believing in Islam to going to a level of Iman where we are now practicing what we preach and practicing and acting upon what we believe in. Last night and the previous nights, the first main topic that we went through was the discussion of identity. First, we talked about a fake versus a real identity. A fake identity, we said, was anything superficial or added in, which doesn't really explain somebody's inherent worldview, how they determine what is real and false, what is good, what is evil, etc. So based on that, a real identity, or the real deep down inherent essential identity that all of us should be sharing, is our Muslim identity. The fact that for any question, any answer, any decision we make, it's God whom we go to first, before anything else. Before any other philosophy, any other ideology, any flag, any country, anything else, we seek God's pleasure, we seek His permission, and everything we do is defined by Islam. We can have secondary identities without a problem, whether it's from our countries of origin or whether it's the countries that we've been raised in. That's fine, as long as it doesn't go against our essential identity. We then talked about how for many of us, we've had a crisis or a loss of identity, where in one sense, we claim that we're Muslim, that we want to believe in God and act upon the rulings that He sent down and follow the paradigm and the lens that He's given us to view reality with. But sometimes we fail to do that. And sometimes we grab onto other ideologies or other frameworks. So we gave an analogy to explain this, of the Superman analogy, that sometimes, like Superman, being raised by humans, having been raised by maybe irreligious or not so practicing parents may have affected our essential divine nature. Maybe the schooling that we've gone through has affected things. The friends that we've chosen, the companions that we have, our family members, all of these different factors have affected our pure nature that has been connected to God. Then the final question was, okay, how do we now go and reclaim our true identity? How do we get this true faith in Iman, which is what? It's belief plus practice. How do we get there? This is the main crux of our series now. Going from a Muslim, a person who just claims they believe in a few things, to now a mu'min. And a mu'min is someone who believes, they testify, but they also practice what they believe. So if we are going to claim that For example, we know we should be praying on time, then we actually pray on time. If we know that lying and cheating and stealing is bad, then we do that. If we know that Islam gives us a certain framework to judge what is good and evil, then we use Islam to judge what is good and evil, and not our own desires, not our own whims, or no other ideology or philosophy. We have to clear up the doubts that have caused us to lose out on our identity. And we said that the main idea is that most of us in the modern world, we don't have that certainty in our belief system. And we looked at one of the narrations from the first Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Who said that the best sort of iman that we could obtain is obtained through what? It's ascertained and obtained through having excellent certainty. Afdalul iman husnul iqan. We're trying to get yaqeen, certainty, meaning that we get to a place regarding whatever aspects of religion that we understand, we get there with certainty. That's what we want to try to do over these next few nights. And of course, the most important topic for every single Muslim is Tawheed. And that will be our first discussion that we will start tonight. Now, within this discussion of Tawheed, there's a few subtopics that we'll try to address. The first is about what differentiates us, right? So the differences between how we as Muslims perceive Tawheed versus how other religions or ideas may perceive Tawheed. And within that, we'll also talk about how in the modern world, that's very, very important for us to understand. The second question that we'll try to look at is about the rationality, the aspect of rationality or logic, it being logical, meaning is believing in God logical or rational, or is it irrational and illogical? We are accused right now by many of the growing atheist population in this country and around the world that our beliefs, starting with the belief in God, is irrational, it's illogical, and there is no evidence for it. So our belief in it, na'udhu billah, is it's barbaric, it's ridiculous, and we shouldn't do that. So we have to try to answer that question. And then inshallah, what we will start tonight, I don't know if we'll get there, but we'll start talking about the idea of proofs, specifically rational proofs. What does that really mean? And we'll try to then offer evidence for God's existence. So this will be the at least three main subtopics that we try to address tonight. Most likely, because this topic is vast, we'll most likely continue it tomorrow night as well, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. Please recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Okay. So our first point is about the differences that we may have with other religions. Let's first start off with a narration from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, where he says that at-tawheed hayatun nafs. That tawheed is the life or the life force or the life blood of our nafs, of our soul, of our being, of our existence, of our identity. So the first thing that we see here is tawheed is essentially linked to the idea of identity. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we could discuss this and open it up. Within a very Muslim context, for example, others within our own faith, sometimes within our own sect, accuse us of not paying importance to Allah. They say you're focusing too much on the imams, or maybe too much on your scholars, and you're not paying attention to God. What's the problem there, right? Others will say that where is Tawheed in terms of the Islamic faith, right? Not just within the Islamic religion, but in terms of all the other religions that exist, how does Islam stand in that sense? Our claim would be that Islam understands, practices, and recognizes Tawheed better than any other religion or ideology that exists. But it's a big claim. So first, we want to look internally. Yes, it is true that sometimes followers of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim wassalam, may not put as much emphasis as they should in Tawheed. I'm not going to deny that fact. Sometimes we do put too much emphasis on personalities, whether they're infallible personalities or even fallible personalities like our scholars. Now, this is not to diminish the value of those individuals. That's not what we are trying to talk about here. Our scholars, our maraji', they hold an esteemed place. May Allah bless them, protect them, and give them a long life, and grant forgiveness to all those in the past, and may He increase the shade of those individuals who have passed down the teachings of Islam that you and I wouldn't have without them and the work that they've done. As well, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam are our connection to Allah. Without them, we would have a very weak picture of reality. So of course we put them, where they belong, as the perfect human beings who have given us an understanding of ethics, morality, reality, philosophy, spirituality, history. Everything comes through them. But we have to remember that when somebody or a group of people are pointing somewhere, we have to be careful. We don't focus on the finger and who's doing the pointing. If they're indicating towards something, if they're pointing towards something, we should look where they're pointing. And the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam, all the prophets of God, all the ma'asumin, the whole job was to point towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their whole job was to try to get us to understand Tawheed in the way that it should be understood, in the way that other religions sort of degenerated and failed to understand God as He wished to be understood and as He desires to be understood right now. This is perhaps why our first Imam is giving us this initial formula that Tawheed is the life force of a person's soul. It's the life force and lifeblood of their identity. So this is very important for our discussion here, where we are claiming that you and I have lost our identity. We're having an identity crisis, especially where we see in the Quran, as we mentioned in the previous nights, that Allah saying, don't be like those who have forgotten about God, because then you'll forget yourself, you'll forget your identity. So clearly now we can see this highlighted in this narration too, that if we can understand Tawheed, then perhaps that'll be our first clue, the first factor, first element, first piece of the puzzle to help us get a grip on our reality, to help us gather our identity and make sure we go closer to our true nature and our true identity. So now where do we go from here? The second part is about how we as Muslims focus on God in a way that others may not focus. Even in our name, right? So, we know famously, right, that we are Muslims. Muslim meaning a person who, practices or performs Islam. And what do we know as far as that's concerned? That's about submission. Sometimes people love to bring in the word peace. Yes, salam means peace, but Islam means to submit, and a Muslim is one who submits. Who are we submitting to? It's Allah, right? That's what we mean by our true key identity. We are submitting to whatever God wants. That's what a Muslim is. But not everybody defines their identity like this, their religious identity. Even throughout time, when people have tried to describe us Muslims, they haven't even used the word Islam or Muslims. So very famously, if you look at the way that Europeans have tried to explain us, they don't call us Muslims, they would call us Muhammadans, right? Because they were used to people understanding religious identity with two different factors. One would be place, the other would be a personality or people. So, as an example, Hinduism is sometimes referred to as Hinduism because they say it's associated with the Hind region, right? Or Judaism. According to some religious scholars, they say Judaism is named that place because of the area of Judea, the land of Judea, right? Now, again, there are differences of opinion here, but I'm just giving some examples. As far as people, right, the best example would be Christianity. In their name, they are immediately identified with a personality, not with God, but with Christ, an individual, right? Yes, of course, they believe him to be, this idea. Many of the Christians believe this idea of Trinity, so one could argue that fact too. But again, the idea is it's a focus on a personality rather than the Holy Spirit for them or for God. Or another example would be in Buddhism. Again, in the name itself, it's about Buddha, right? They're a character there, or a person or personality. We Muslims don't call ourselves followers of Muhammad. We are submitters to Allah. That's who we submit to. We only follow the Holy Prophet because he was an Abdullah, because he was a servant of God. And this is something that we testify within our prayers as well, right? Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. In our prayers, we are taught to remember that, look, he was a slave and a servant of God, and then he was a Rasul, a messenger. So this point highlights the fact that Islam itself is about the focus on God. It's about Tawheed. Everything else, with its importance and its place, has importance, but it's, in a sense, secondary to God. Everything, whether it's the prophets of God, whether it's the imams, whether it's the scholars, everything should be subsumed under the idea of Tawheed. We are a Tawheed-centric, a God-centric religion. And that's something we should keep in mind when we try to re-examine and re-obtain the faith that you and I may have lost, to try to gather again that identity when we're having this crisis in the modern world. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Now, some of you are saying, Hassan, why would we bother wasting our time? Why do we have to talk about Tawheed? We all know this. We've been raised with the idea. We know that God is one. As many of you have been forced to memorize since you were, a child, like I was. We were told in Urdu, for example, Allah ek, right? Allah ahad, or Allah wahid. God is one. That's it. We're done. Why do we need any other fancy discussion? It's useless. Well, here's a question to think about. If one of your coworkers or classmates or family members, or even your children, were to come to you and ask you, mom, dad, or whoever, I know that we believe that there's a God, but why do we believe that God exists? Would you be able to actually respond? How would you be able to respond to them? A lot of individuals may respond that, well, I know God exists in my heart. He has to be real. I just can't really explain it. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But the problem is the world we are living in is a different world. Had we been living in our countries of origin, especially if we came from Muslim countries, this wouldn't really be an issue for us. This was something for the academics and the philosophers to talk about. But in this world, where even maybe 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't such a big deal, now we see things like atheism, agnosticism, irreligiosity on the rise, even within our own communities. If you look at the research that's been done, grabbing percentages and the demographics of atheism and agnosticism and irreligiosity, it's growing exponentially every single year. For example, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, the percentage of atheists in America was maybe only 1 to 5%, and a very slow kind of growth. Now, some numbers indicate that atheism, self-proclaimed atheists, are at around 20 to 30%. That's a huge number of individuals. 20 to 30% of Americans claim, they absolutely will say out loud that I am a self-proclaimed atheist. This is not including agnostics. It's not including people who are doubtful about God. It's not including people who have left their faith and are not, they're confused about life. This is just saying 20 to 30% of Americans will say without a doubt that I am an atheist. I do not believe in God. That's a very, very dangerous number. And these individuals are growing more and more every day. And they have this wherewithal, they have the gumption and the fortitude to be able to come to people and say, why would you believe in this stuff? It's a joke. We don't need your religion anymore. We have our human intellect, our reason. We have science. We don't need your made-up fairy tale religions. Na'udhu billah. So forgive me for putting it in these words, but I'm only using the words that these atheists use. You're bringing these ideas from the Bronze Age. You guys are uncivilized. You're barbaric. Get your ridiculous notions and mythologies out of the modern world. We don't want it here. And this has caused many in our community to leave Islam because they have no answers. Some would stick with Islam just because they're afraid of what might happen in the community. We have this huge sort of ex-Muslim movement in the US as well. You have some ex-Muslims who are self-proclaimed ex-Muslims, but then you have some who anonymously join the organization, and they're in fear that because of my family pressure or my pressure from my friends or my community or my masjid or whatever, I can't tell people that I don't believe in Islam or I don't believe in God anymore. This is something that we have to recognize as a reality. Now, we have to deal with it. Whether you and I have strong faith or not, that is one thing. All of these doubts that are creeping in, to some degree, have made most of us lose out on our peak religiosity to some degree. So many of us, in effect, have become, although we're Muslims by name, we may claim Islamic beliefs, but in action, we're actually atheists. Or again, another way of saying it is that instead of being mu'mineen and actors upon our faith, we are Muslims only, meaning we just claim that we believe the stuff, but we don't actually act upon it. Again, go back to our series title, From Muslim to Mu'min. That's what we're trying to do. This is not a new phenomenon as well. This did exist in the time of the Imams. They had atheists, but generally they would be able to deal with them, as needed. And there's many stories, but I don't want to go into it tonight, maybe some other night, inshallah, if we have time. So this is the first point we wanted to address. Let's go now to our second discussion. And our second discussion will be about answering this question. Is it rational and logical to believe in God? So we can start that session and discussion and subtopic if you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Is it rational? Is it logical to believe in God? So the first thing we need to do right off the bat, which may not be obvious, but it needs to be our first point, is figure out, what does it mean to be rational? What does it mean to be logical? Now, many of you may be thinking, I know what it means. I know what it means to be rational. I know what it means to be logical, just like I know what it means to be irrational and illogical. I'm going to submit that most of us have no idea what it actually means. In fact, if you look at any sort of discussion that takes place, especially discussions on social media, on WhatsApp, chat groups, on Facebook, on Twitter, etc., the sort of arguments that take place, normally what happens is the word rational, the word logical, or again, it's contradiction, it's opposite, irrational, illogical, is merely a pejorative term. It's used to slander and insult somebody. It becomes equivalent to saying that somebody's being childish or immature, etc., right? You're telling somebody, you're just being irrational. What you want to be really saying is that, in a sense, you're trying to say, when you say that they're irrational or logical, you just want to say, you know what, you're wrong. Or you don't make sense to me. I don't find any value in what you're saying. And you can find many different arguments right now. Let's just say, for example, you came across a Muslim who said that, I'm in the upcoming election, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. You might say, how could you do something like that? That's irrational. That's illogical. They haven't even offered their argument, and you're already saying that it's irrational and illogical. Or the other way around, somebody may be saying that they'll vote for Joe Biden. And then, again, you could say, that's the most illogical move that I could ever think of. Well, a lot of times, we don't know what we're saying. We use these words without actually having the proper meaning there. So if we were to offer a simple definition, we can jump to the Oxford Dictionary, for example. Webster's Oxford, it's pretty much the same. Webster's or Oxford will just say, look, something is logical, something is rational if it's based on what? It's based on facts and reason. Or, more importantly, it's not emotions and not feelings. This is one of the simple ways that it's defined. Now, we could argue with this definition, but I don't want to do that because that'll really sort of take us into a deeper discussion, which I'm not interested in right now. But that's it. So let's give an example here. If somebody were to ask you, hey, why do you believe in God? If I say, well, you know what? I feel the power of God. I feel the love of God in my heart. We're not saying the argument is right or wrong. We're not saying it's a good or a bad argument. Somebody might say, well, that is technically illogical or it's irrational. Just because you have a feeling in your heart doesn't mean that, that's a good proof for God necessarily. Right? Or that's simply not a logical or rational proof. Somebody may say, for example, that, well, let's say I was suffering from an illness, right? Or a loved one was suffering from an illness, and it was their faith. It was my faith in God, and that had healed them. It was a miracle that we witnessed. Now, again, was it really a miracle or not? Could somebody else offer another explanation of how that person was healed? Yeah, possibly. So maybe it wasn't fully logical or fully rational. That could be based on somebody's emotions or feelings. Now, there is one caveat that I want to mention here too, which we have to be careful of. A lot of times we examine and think that everything in the world needs to be phrased and formed and explained in terms of logic and reason without emotions or facts. That's something that's in the modern world that we have to be careful of, because this is not the ideal way and not a good way to go about your life. Let me give you an example. If somebody were to ask you, how do you know that the parents that raised you are actually your biological parents? How do you know that the parents that raised you are actually your biological parents? What if they were robots? Or what if they were clones? Or what if they weren't your biological parents? Maybe you were adopted and they never told you, right? Something like that. Now, most of us, we wouldn't have any actual evidence for them, right? Most of us haven't bothered with, let's say, a DNA test. But based on general experience or intuition, we'd say, look, they raised us with love and care. I'm going to assume that they're my parents, and I don't have any evidence otherwise. So, my emotions and feelings have value here. It's not every single idea that exists that needs logical reasoning or full-on rationality. Sometimes our emotions and our feelings are enough, and we don't have to go beyond that. Another example would be if somebody asks you, how do you know you exist? Can you give me some logical reasoning? Like, no, I know I can feel myself existing. That's it, right? I know that I don't exist because I can feel it. I know I have emotions. That makes me real. You don't have to explain this to somebody else. You don't have to offer some sort of scientific or logical argument to them. No, it's enough for you. So we have to be careful of being, jumping into somebody else's framework and for every single argument. Now, can we offer logical arguments for, let's say, God's existence and things like that? Yes, we can, which we'll get to. But we don't want to be trapped by this sort of modernist framework that many have, that every single reality in the world needs to be explained through science, where every single thing in the world needs to be explained through cold, unemotional logic and reasoning. Because then we wouldn't really have a human existence anymore. Humanity is primarily defined by our emotions and our feelings, right? We're not just some artificial, intelligent, robotic, whatever sort of system there. We're not just ones and zeros. There's a dimension to us which makes us human, which makes us greater than any other creation in the world. A part of that is our ability to use logic and reasoning, but it's our emotions and feelings which also play a part in there as well. The emotions and feelings, it's definitely an important discussion of how it ties into our understanding reality, but that's not the subject that I want to go to tonight, and I don't think I'll talk about it in our future sessions, because it does devote a lot of attention, but this would be something that we would talk about, let's say, in an epistemology course, right? A theory of knowledge. How do we know that emotions and feelings have epistemic value? So I don't want to go that way. The reason we're talking about rationality and logic is because that's what our opponents use against us. They say, you offer me a logical or rational proof of God. Again, our first step is to recognize, look, I don't have to offer you anything, number one. I know that emotions and feelings and intuition is very valuable, but if you need some sort of logical argument, we can offer it for you. But the first step is to figure out, what do we actually mean by logic? What do we mean by reasoning? What do we mean by rationality? So our next discussion then is this. Where do we find that answer? And we find that answer in what we call the study or the science of logic. Please recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So the science of logic, or the discipline of logic, in Arabic is known as mantiq. Many of you may have heard of this word before, right? Ilm al-mantiq, the science or the knowledge of logic and reasoning. There's many different types of logics, right? You may have heard it, right? There's what we call kind of philosophical logic, which sometimes is also known as formal logic, which again, properly is called Aristotelian logic, right? Sometimes you have mathematical logic, right? For example, when we say that 1 + 1 = 2, that is a logical form of explaining it, right? This is not based on science. There's no scientific evidence for 1 + 1 = 2. This is something, mathematical ideas are studied as a form of logic, logical reasoning. That's another example. You have logical in computer science, right? There's sort of computer logic, if you will, right? And you have another trend also known as informal logic, which I really don't want to get into, right? Again, within these, there's various different branches and discussions. So over here, we said that this philosophical formal one is called Aristotelian logic. Aristotelian formal logic is called Aristotelian because it was sort of written down by Aristotle. Aristotle is the one who recognized that, every human being uses their logic, they use their reasoning, but we need to set a form of foundations. We need to set some ground rules so that people know when there's a good argument, a logical argument, or a false argument, an incorrect argument. Because what was happening in that time in Greece when, you had these famous wise men, right? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. When they were discussing with people then who believed that, reality doesn't exist and there's no way of knowing what is real. There's no way of knowing what is true and false. So Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they helped form these rules of logic so that people would know when is somebody giving you a good argument and when is somebody giving a fallacious argument, a fallacy. So this stuff is studied in many different fields, right? You can take a logic class in college. You can take a logical class sometimes in different seminaries. Like I know in Christian seminaries, sometimes they teach Aristotelian logic. In the Hawza, in the Islamic seminaries, this is one of the fundamental courses. You cannot go, in one of your first courses is ilm al-mantiq for at least 3 terms, at least, if not more. How to make sure your arguments follow a logical form, right? Because there are going to be many places where you need to stick to that form so that you don't make a false argument, so that you don't offer a fallacy, right? This is what we have to be careful of. So what I'd like to do now for the rest of the evening is give you one example of a rule or a form that was created or kind of outlined by Aristotle, known as Form 1 logic. We'll take that form, we'll take a simple argument for the existence of God and see if that's the case, if we can fit this proof of God in this formal logic, then that means that the atheist claim that we don't have a logical argument and a rational argument for God is incorrect, untrue, and that's one way we can debunk their sort of idea. So let's start off with that now. If you can recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
So, one of the first things that's discussed when you're forming what they call a proposition or a claim is something called the Form 1 proposition. Many of you know this as well. In mathematics, this would be called, in a sense, your transitive law or transitive property. So in math, at least it goes like this, right? If A is equal to B and B equals C, then A must equal C, right? This is the transitive property, right? The same thing applies in Form 1 logic, right? You have something that you say that A is B, then you also say that B is C. Therefore, what logically follows without a doubt is that A is C. That's your conclusion. So normally you call this your first premise or your major premise sometimes, your second premise or minor premise, depending that, and then you have your conclusion at the end. If each premise holds, then your conclusion is what we call logically sound. Let me give you an example so it makes sense. So that's not just a bunch of like letter mumbo jumbo, right? So let's say somebody claims that, or I'll say this, right? I'll say that, I love the lovers of Imam Hussein. Alayhi salam. Great, that's our first claim. I love the lovers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Then we say the lovers of the Imam are, put it this way, right? Like are all of you, right? All of you, meaning the community here at the IMAN Center. So what is the conclusion then? It's that I love all of you, right? And I hope all of you love me too, inshallah, for the sake of Allah. So this is a simple way, right? So the I love part is like our A. I'll use different colors to make it clear. Yeah. So I love comes down over here. That's our A. Then we have the lovers of Islam, or lovers of Imam Hussein, sorry, our B, which comes down, right? We repeat it over here. And then our final one, our C, is all of you, which you repeat down over here. So this is a logical, sound argument. As long as this is true, which is true. If you love Imam Hussein, I love you. And I know for a fact, and we all know for a fact that the lovers of Imam Hussein are all of you. Therefore, this would be a logical conclusion to draw. Okay? So hopefully that was understood. Now, let's take a look at a proof, or some of the proofs for God. We're going to go with one simple one tonight, inshallah. From there, we'll try to plug it in and see, look, if the premises are true, then the conclusion should follow, and then the atheists need to leave us alone, because we say, look, we got our logical argument, now you need to go find somebody else to bother, right? Something like that. Okay. So now our final discussion tonight is our proofs for God. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
This is 3 for us, yeah? Okay. There's many different types of proofs for God's existence, right? You have the cosmological proof, you have the ontological proof, you have a proof from morality, you have the proof from contingency, you have the proof from motion. There's a lot. There's a very famous version which almost every single religion has used throughout time, not just within the Abrahamic tradition, but even outside of that. And this sort of argument is known as the style is called the teleological argument, or teleological proof. And normally we don't hear that word. What we hear is kind of famously that it's an argument from design or by design, or sometimes also known as the proof and by order. There's some examples that people give as well about this watchmaker argument, right? And to summarize the watchmaker argument, this was famously explained by William Paley, right, Christian theologian, who said that, imagine you find, right, you're just going off in the desert, and you, I don't know if I can really draw a watch here, but whatever, that's closest as you're going to get. So you see a watch in the middle of nowhere. Now you see that, look, there's all these complex parts. All these parts work in conjunction with everything. They're telling time. Like, there must be somebody intelligent that put this together, right? In a sense, this sort of intelligent designer argument. So this watch couldn't have been put here out of nowhere, right? It can't come from nothingness. Somebody intelligent must have put it together. So if you see design, you must figure out that there must be a designer that's there. So the watchmaker sort of analogy was used to explain this design order argument. So I'm going to write it out for you in this sort of A, B, B, C, A, C stuff, so that we can see whether or not it actually holds and whether it's a good argument or not, inshallah. Okay. Now, again, this has been used by many individuals, right? Different forms of the teleological argument. You'll find written down by Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Saint Augustine, Saint Thomas Aquinas, Musa ibn Maymun, or Maimonides, as he's known as, the famous Jewish scholar, Ibn Rushd, Ghazali, Isaac Newton. The list goes on and on. In our contemporary theology books, you'll see this argument as well, right? So many of you may be already familiar with it, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you the simple form of the argument, right? Simple form is this. This universe has order and design. Okay, that's our first premise. The second is that anything that has anything ordered or designed must have a designer. Or an order. Then, of course, based on that, our conclusion is what? This universe has, or must have a designer. And with all the complexity that we see in the world and everything, we end up calling this designer God. That's the simple sort of argument here, right? So this universe is pretty much our A that you see over here. You see our B is order and design, right? So we hear something that has order and design. You just pass down your B. And then C is must have a designer, which we've copied over here. Must have a designer. So as far as the A, B, B, C, A, C part, that's fine. The question that we have to figure out is each of these premises true or not? If we can prove that each of the premises are true, then we will get a proper conclusion that the argument is logically sound, and we would have had a logical proof for the existence of God. So now let's start examining each premise one by one after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Okay. So first off, right? The first claim was what? The universe has order and design, right? Now, this should be very obvious. Even if for an atheist, there's no reason they should deny this claim, right? They say, look at the orbits of the various planets, right? These are going in a very specific orbit. They don't like fall down and crash onto other planets. That's there, right? Or they give the example, look at the human or all living things in terms of their life cycle. Whatever is needed for another animal to sustain and exist is there. Specifically for humans, look at our body. Look at every single system: the circulatory system, the digestive system, our nervous system, everything. It all functions in a very perfect way to allow us to sustain and exist. We don't just spontaneously fall apart, right? Within this, we see an order and a sort of design. It's not just haphazardly there. Another way of putting it, right, is think about if I take an apple seed, right? I plant it in the ground. What do you get? Well, obviously you get an apple tree. Provided you give the right amount of sunlight, soil, water, everything. But you never plant an apple seed and get an orange tree, or you don't plant an apple seed and get like a tractor or fire, right? There is a very specific effect when you have the causes there. So another way that we're talking about here is what? It's causality. We have a very fine-tuned system of cause and effect in our universe. So this premise, if nobody can deny this one. If an atheist, and again, they're going to probably run off to science, if they say, no, we don't accept that. They say, look, if you don't have cause and effect, if you believe in chaos, then you can't believe in science. The whole premise of science is that cause and effect exists. The reason that we can experiment on things, observe things, experiment over and over again, and then say, look, because of one cause, we jump to an effect, and then make predictions, is only if causality exists. If there is no such thing as cause and effect, then science is completely meaningless and completely useless. So this premise, nobody who's rational and thinking would deny. Where we might have issues here would be our second premise, right? Our second premise is that anything that has design, right? Let me just write it simply, right? So if it's designed, then it should have a designer. This is where people may say, well, how do we know that? What's our actual evidence and arguments for that? Now, so far, I want you to pay attention here. So far, we haven't talked about the Quran. We haven't talked about hadith, narrations. We haven't used any scholars. We haven't sought recourse to appeal to authority. We are just going by a mix of sort of logical reasoning and scientific arguments. That's about it. So far, so good. This is all logical, right? We haven't brought in anything else right now. Now, can you find these things in the Quran and hadith? Of course you could. But the point is, we want to establish these ideas for somebody who doesn't believe in the Quran, who doesn't believe in the narrations, who doesn't believe in this. Say, look, without all of that, let's see if we can still establish it. Okay? So now, second premise, right? Design. If it's designed, it needs a designer. Well, how do we know? So I want to give an example here. Let's say I'm walking, and as I'm walking, I have a tray in my hand. And on this tray, let's say I'm holding different cans of paint. So I have red, I've got blue, and let's say green. Right? Now I'm walking along, and as I'm walking, I happen to trip, I fall down, and when I trip and fall down, all of these colors, naturally, they spill. Now when it spills, it makes this sort of shape, right? It almost looks like, the way that it spills, that, you see this almost face-like figure. Right? I'm trying to make it look like it's a spill. Now, we can ask ourselves, is this possible? Could something like that happen? Yeah, that's possible, right? Meaning you could have an accident that creates this sort of formed or designed thing accidentally. Okay, that's possible. Say, okay, no problem. Let's up the ante a little bit. Let's say now, we add a couple more colors, right? I add a, no, oops. I'm going to add yellow. I'll add orange, and then I'll add brown. Right? And then imagine a couple more colors that I don't want to waste time and draw every single thing. So I add a few more there. Now, is it possible that now with all that there, that maybe the paint spills in a way that every single color, again, helps make this sort of image, which we might say looks like a face or looks like something organized. So yeah, it looks like somebody intended to do that. But is it possible it happened accidentally? Yeah, that's also possible. It's not impossible. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. Now, imagine now, final example. I'm holding a palette, and this palette has 1.2 billion colors. Now, obviously, I have to have pretty long arms to be able to hold a tray of that many colors, but whatever. One or let's say 2 billion different colors. Now, if let's say I spill all of that, and everything there becomes, it works together and makes all these like masterpieces. Is this something that a logical individual would believe is possible? With those many variables at play, that you can get masterpieces. And in fact, maybe the picture that you get after you spill everything is that it looks like a picture of a person painting a masterpiece. Like you're saying, look, there's no way that this could have happened accidentally. This is irrational, illogical, impossible. The question is this: how far can we take all these variables to say that something is possibly it's accidental? Now we bring in the idea of what we see out in the universe. We see that, for example, there are 10,000 unique and growing unique species of birds. There are 32,000 unique species of fish. There are 250,000 unique species of flowers. In total, by some accounts, they said that there are over 8.7 million unique species in the known universe. Now, how is it possible? 8.7 million unique species, according to many scientists who believe all this comes from a system of evolution, right, of adaptation and mutations. All the information needed within every single one of these living creatures from the Big Bang up until now, it's there so that you and I can exist here and continue with the life cycle. Is this something rational for somebody to think of? Yeah, this could happen accidentally. See, this is not a rational, logical belief. This is completely far-fetched to say that, yeah, this randomly just happened. Over 8.7 million unique things. This doesn't make sense. In the same way that we wouldn't believe 8.7 million unique pictures could be made from an accidental spill, why would we believe that 8.7 million unique species could come out one after another, all working together in this formal life cycle? The complete universe is working so that you and I can exist. How can that be something that somebody believes is accidental? The only way you can believe that is if you're being illogical and irrational. And in fact, we would tell the atheist, we don't need to prove that to anybody. Just look at your scientific studies. You look at your research. You would say the same thing. These are the conclusions that you have drawn in science. You talk about the order, the design, the beauty of the universe. And now these other galaxies that are being discovered, all working in tandem, all working together, without any sort of flaws in them whatsoever. Can a person really think that it's possible for something like that to come out accidentally or from nothing? No, it's the other side that needs to offer evidence that this is possibly something that comes from an accident or it comes from nothingness. Otherwise, it's an irrational and illogical, unscientific idea.
Salawat ala
Muhammad.
So, if you were to go back now, what are we looking at here? Let's go. Our first premise, we showed that, again, this is logical and reasonable. Our second premise, we also showed that was logical and reasonable. Again, no Quran, no verses at all, no narrations, no feelings, no emotions. We were just going by whatever scientists have claimed and through their studies, through their research, and whatever we understand through logic and reasoning. No emotions, no feelings, no quoting anybody else. That's it. Based on all of this, it now logically, rationally, is absolutely sound that we can claim that, yes, this universe must have a designer. It can't come accidentally. It's not logical for it to come from nothingness. So where do atheists have the right to come and say, no, there is no logical proof? We just gave you a very simple proof that we used your own science to show. Everything that you have concluded throughout the years of scientific research, that's what you have explained, and we're using that to show you. This is all pointing towards the existence of a designer, of an intelligent designer, of a God. Why is it so difficult for you to understand? So hopefully today what you've recognized is that once we understand the definition of being rational or logical, we use evidence, whatever's available in front of us. We seek recourse to the Quran, to the Ahlul Bayt, not to our emotions or feelings. We can use the Form 1 logic, Aristotelian logic, to show we absolutely have at least one piece of evidence that's logical and reasonable. And mu'mineen, mu'minat, this is the simplest proof that we have. The other arguments that I told you about, the cosmological, the ontological, everything else, those are even more logical. Like this one is a very simple one, but it can get very, very, much, much deeper. What we offer is very rational and very logical. That's one of the crowning achievements of our religion. But here's the thing, here's the problem. A scientist may come and they object. They say, fine, we accept that there is design. We accept that there is order, but we don't say that you need a God to do that. Why are you saying that the designer is God? We can say that evolution, for example, that is what led to the design. Or somebody might say, in the Big Bang, that is actually what caused the creation of the universe, not some sort of God. Everything was present at the Big Bang, and that's what caused everything. Why do you have to say that you needed a God to do everything? So now that's our next question. Does the Big Bang Theory, for example, does that disprove our idea of needing a God? Tomorrow night, that'll be our next discussion. Can the Big Bang Theory disprove God? Does it disprove God? Or does it actually help our understanding, if it's believed? Does it help us prove and make the case that there is a logical, rational, scientific argument for the existence of God? So this will be what we discuss tomorrow night, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So now again, maybe some of these discussions tonight and whatever, we went a little bit longer. There was a lot of information obviously to go through, and I even cut out some things as well. You may not be used to these types of discussions, but I'm doing whatever I think is beneficial for our communities to hear, whether you're younger or whether you're older. These are not the types of discussions we're going to hear all the time, and they hopefully are contemporary, they're modern, and they're useful for us in our daily life. That's what I hope. Remember to tie this into our greater discussion. Hopefully, by hearing these arguments out loud, by seeing it written out, right? Hopefully, the notes were helpful, inshallah. When we see that maybe might increase our iman a little bit, right? Like, now I see that it is logical, it is rational, that everybody else, these atheists have nothing to stand on, right? And again, this is our starting point, right? We have more to go through, inshallah. Hopefully that gives us that fire, that strength. It's a spark. It's a catalyst for us to now practice more of what we preach, to go from Muslim to mu'min. Inshallah, hopefully this is how our discussions throughout the nights can help us, inshallah. And if anybody has done their own research, right, who have read the different books by Dawkins and Hitchens and Stephen Hawking and Sam Harris, Lawrence Krauss, all these famous atheists, feel free to bring those when you submit your questions to the to the team. Also, on whenever we do have our Q&A session, you can bring those as well, so we can have a helpful, healthy, civil, fruitful discussion, inshallah ta'ala. So let's recite one more salawat before we move on to the Masa'ib for tonight. Salawat
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
This topic that we have been addressing, although we say that it's something that's useful for the youth because they're dealing with it in school, in university, it's something that parents need to hear as well. A lot of times I hear from centers, from elders, they say, we need to have more programs for the youth. We need to help out and, increase the iman of our youth. And that's definitely the case. We don't deny that. But something that we have to remember is, as we mentioned in the previous nights, the way that the iman of of children becomes strong is through the iman of the parents. You get strong mu'mineen children from strong mu'mineen parents. And this example we see through the children who we'll be honoring tonight, the children of our beloved lady Zainab alayha salam, Aran and Muhammad alayhim salam. You see, On and Muhammad, they as mu'mineen, as lovers of Imam Hussein, as followers of the religion of Islam, as those whose identity was strong, who had certainty in their beliefs, who were ready to defend Islam with their lives. Again, 9, maybe 10 and 11. That's as old as they have been recorded to have been. This sort of faith doesn't come out of nowhere. This comes from when parents take an active responsibility in the lives of their children. They educate them, they help them critically think, they educate them, they share their information, they're humble with their children. In the same way, we have role models with the elders, as we talked about Habib ibn Mudahir last night. This example tonight is for our children. And also, it's also serves as a dual example for our parents, showing that if you want to have kids like On and Muhammad, then make sure that you give them and instill in them the love of Allah, pure Islam, the love of the Ahlul Bayt, especially in times like this where we discuss the tragedy of Karbala and use Karbala as a sort of institution and a school to improve our iman. Bibi Zainab and Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. These are the two parents who have raised these two wonderful children, right? Aun and Muhammad. You know, normally when we pay our respects to Bibi Zainab, alayha salam, we end up doing so after Ashura, right? We start from Sham Ghariba onwards. It's almost as if we somehow believe that her suffering began at that point, right? Which is of course not true, right? But sometimes that's the way we end up acting. We have to remember that there is a reason why she is known as Ummul Masa'ib, right? The mother of tragedy, the mother of musibah. You have to recognize that. Why is she called that? Why is she Ummul Masa'ib? But we don't call Imam Hussein Abul Masa'ib. We call Bibi Zainab the mother of tragedy, of tribulations, but Imam Hussein is not called the father of trials and tribulations. Think about that and reflect upon that. Perhaps maybe one of the reasons is because, you know, with all due respect to Imam Hussein, he's an imam. We have expectations for what he should be able to handle, his ma'rifah, his understanding. Bibi Zainab, now yes, she's being raised by Ali and Fatima, but her ma'rifah, her upbringing, it's a bit different. She's not an imam in that sense. She's a ma'asuma, definitely. She's infallible, she's perfect, but her perfection stems from something different. Perhaps this is why her suffering can't be compared to Imam Hussein or anybody else. She went through what she went through. She carried on the message of the Imam. She carried on the message of Karbala, starting off the majalis from a perspective of somebody who is not an Imam. But still, even with that, she was able to achieve this great success in spreading the message of her brother and the tragedy of Karbala. And I think the greatest sort of point to remember here is the reason why the Shahada of On and Muhammad is so difficult, especially for Imam Hussein, was because the relationship of Imam Hussein and Zainab was so strong. As brother and sister, Bibi Zainab and Imam Hussein were close, very close, even from the beginning. Some historians say that when Bibi Zainab was born, you know, when she would, as a child, when she would cry and she would become restless, you know how sometimes a baby, a newborn becomes restless and they'll say they'll, you know, give it to the mother. So the mother will take the baby and they'll stop. But sometimes this wouldn't work. They would give Zainab to Bibi Fatima and she would still continue to be restless. They would pass her to Imam Ali and still she would be restless. They would pass her to Imam Hassan, still she would be restless. But the historians say that when Bibi Zainab was put in the hands of Hussein, she would calm down instantly. This was the relationship, even from the beginning, that Hussein and Zainab had. Imagine the love that the brother and sister had. When Amir al-Mu'mineen married his daughter Zainab to Abdullah bin Ja'far, he put a condition in the marriage contract. Some historians claim that he said, Ya Abdullah, I'm allowing you to marry my great daughter Zainab, but there's one condition. That you must never ever separate my Hussein from my Zainab. Wherever Hussein goes, Zainab must go. Imagine how even Imam Ali recognizes the connection of Zainab and Imam Hussein. And this is why they say Zainab had to go with Imam to Karbala. On the night of Ashura, now we see that On and Muhammad, the sons, are looking for permission to go out and to defend the religion of Islam, to defend their uncle. But of course, Imam Hussein, he can't let his nephews go out like this. It breaks his heart. He says, no, you're too young. I won't let you go out. When An and Muhammad's hearts are broken, they run back to their mother, as all children do. They run back and they tell their mother, Mama, we want to go and defend. We want to fight, but Imam Hussein is not letting us go. What should we do? This is where some narrations say that this is where Bibi Zainab dresses them up in beautiful clothing. She puts this kuhl on their eyes. She beautifies them. Again, she's sending them to their death, but she beautifies them in order to calm down the heart of Hussein, to maybe get him to change his mind. She walks with An and Muhammad to the tent of Hussein and says, Ya Hussein, Ya Akhi, oh my brother, you must accept these two as a sacrifice on behalf of your sister. Hussein said, Zainab, I can't do that. These are your children. These are your sons. You will need them after Karbala because you don't know what you will be going through. I need somebody there to protect you. It's perhaps because Hussein knew that Abbas wouldn't be there to protect her. But they say, Zainab says that Abdullah, my husband, he's given us permission to sacrifice these children on his behalf. So when Hussein heard this, he said, fine. But remember, these are young children. They don't know how to fight. They don't know the art of war. They could barely get onto a horse by themselves. So quickly, very quickly, Imam Hussein and Abbas begin training An and Muhammad, showing them how to properly hold the sword, what to do, how to protect one another, how to not be flanked, how to go this way and that way, to watch each other's backs. And when they went out like this, they say that this was an amazing thing that two young boys did as they defended themselves. When somebody would come and attack An from one side, Muhammad would come and protect him. When somebody would try to get behind and flank Muhammad, An, his brother, would come and defend him. But there was one thing before they went out, which was the most important piece of advice that they said. They told him, Bibi Zainab came and kissed them on their foreheads before they left and said, Muhammad, my great children, there's one thing that I want you to remember. When you go out, you might get close to the river Furat. You might get close to the Euphrates. If you get close to that, remember, I don't want you to take any water from the Furat because your cousins here are still thirsty. Sakina, Ruqayya is still thirsty here. Your 6-month-old nephew, Ali al-Asghar, your cousin Ali al-Asghar is still thirsty. So I don't even want you to go close to that river. I don't want you even to look at the river of Furat. After An and Muhammad were struck down and they had lost their lives, when the bodies had come back, mu'mineen, mu'minat, everyone else, all of the other mothers, when their family members had come back, they would go out and greet the bodies and they would cry over their bodies. But Bibi Zainab, they say, when she came out, they say that she would go down into sujood and say, Rabbana taqabbal minna hadhal qurban. Ya Allah, accept this sacrifice on our behalf. Ala la'natullah ala qawmi zalimin wa saya'lamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. Ya Allah, by the right of Muhammad and al Muhammad, we ask you to forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, muslimin, muslimat. We ask you to, as parents, help us raise children like An and Muhammad who have your ma'rifah, who understand the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. Ya Allah, for those of us who are the ages of An and Muhammad, help us be like them. And even us as elders, as those who are older than An and Muhammad, help us understand their ma'rifah and forgive us by the right that they have with you, Ya Allah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. रन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत अम्मा, रन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत अम्मा, रुकने देता नहीं ये शौक़े शहादत अम्मा, रन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत अम्मा, रन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत अम्मा। हर कोई शय पे फिदा होने बढ़ा जाता है, अम्मा अब तन पे ये सरबार हुआ जाता है, आप मरने की हमें दीजिए इजाजत अम्मा, रन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत अम्मा, रन को जाते हैं हमें ہر لاش پہ شبیر چلے آتے ہیں ہم، مگر آپ کے قدموں کی قسم کھاتے ہیں ہم، نہیں دیں گے کوئی ماموں کو زحمت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، دین احمد پہ فدا گود پالے کر دیں، اچھا ہم دونوں کو تیغوں کے حوالے کر دیں، اپنے نانا سے نہیں ہوگی حجابت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، فکر مندی کی تمہیں کوئی ضرورت ہی نہیں، اما ہم تو ابھی 18 برس کے بھی نہیں، بھیا اکبر پہ نہیں ہم کو فضیلت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، مولا شبیر پہ مشکل ہے توقف نہ کرو، آپ صدقے کی نیت کیجیے چلے ہم رن کو، آپ کے بھائی کی ٹل جائے مصیبت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، تم سے پہلے نہ چلا جائے کوئی معقل میں، رہنا شبیر کے لشکر کی صف اول میں، یہی بابا نے ہمیں کی ہے نصیحت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، تم نہ رونا نہ کسی اور کو رونے دینا، لاش پامال جو ہوتی ہے تو ہونے دینا، ہے نہیں ہم کو کفن کی بھی ضرورت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، زخم کھانا ہے ہمیں گویا سعادت کی طرح، شے کے دشمن سے تو لڑنا ہے عبادت کی طرح، اپنے نانا کی بچانی ہے ولایت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، سر جو نیزے پہ اٹھیں گے تو اقامت ہوگی، باجماعت شاہ والا کی امامت ہوگی، دنیا دیکھے گی شہیدوں کی شریعت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت، عمارن کو جاتے ہیں ہمیں کیجیے رخصت عمار، رکنے دیتا نہیں یہ شوق शहादत मारन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत मारन को जाते हैं हमें कीजिए रुखसत या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, it's well past time for Maghrib. Turn our attention to the Adhan.
الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله.
Brothers and sisters, just a reminder as we proceed for our Maghrib prayer. After the Maghrib prayer, if you can be kind enough to remember Muharram Abdul Habdi Al Turfi, Sister Firdos's brother, and offer 2 rakat namaz al-wahshad. And namaz al-wahshad, in the first rakat, you will say Ayatul Kursi, and in the second rakat, you will say 10 times Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Okay, thank you. And the niyat is Salatul Wahshad Qab for Marhum Abdul Hadi Al-Turfi. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد 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 بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, just a reminder, please let's offer us 2 rakat salat, salatul washat for the Isali Sahaba of Abdul Hadi Al-Turfi. In the 2 rakats, in the first rakat after Al-Fatiha in Ayatul Kursi 1 time, in the second rakat after Al-Fatiha 10 times Inna Anzalna for the Isali Sahaba with Marhum was buried earlier today in Najaf. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد 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 بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إنه ليس لعلم بموضع رزقي وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي فأجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران لا أدري في سحل هو أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيديك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك اللهم فصل على محمد وآله واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا وماخذه قريبا ولا تعني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقه فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك وصل على محمد وآله وجد عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise belongs to you, our Lord, Lord of the worlds. We ask you to increase your peace and blessings upon our Prophet and upon his family and friends millions of times. O Lord, Despite this great storm, we thank you for the much-needed slowdown. We thank you for the chance to take stock of our lives and finally attend to matters that we had delayed for so long. And we thank you for the newfound appreciation we have for your infinite blessings. O Lord, though we are grateful, we feel like powerless ships drifting into uncharted waters. Borders are closed and planes are grounded. Shops are shuttered and town centers are deserted. Our livelihoods have diminished and we can no longer spend or consume as we like. We can't even leave our homes to visit loved ones, some of whom we may never see again. Your houses are closed and there is no pilgrimage. O Lord, none of us know where all of this is heading, and so we turn to you, admitting our helplessness and fear. We beg you to help us weather this storm in the best of ways, and to please grant us all the good that it contains, and all the good that hides behind it, and to make the journey as smooth as possible. Multiply our positivity and resilience, help us be proactive and productive, and inspire us with creative solutions to the extraordinary challenges we face. Fill us with patience and self-control, gratitude and generosity, and deep compassion towards one another. Fill our homes and neighborhoods with peace, happiness, and grace, and make this the means of unity that humanity so desperately needs. Help us keep our bodies, souls, and minds as fit and healthy as possible. Protect us from infection and from any other illness or accident that would need medical help. Protect us from debt, unemployment, and bankruptcy. And protect us from the many other harms that this storm contains and the harms which hide behind it. And whatever challenges you may place ahead of us, help us to overcome them and give us trust in your wisdom. O Lord, though we don't know where our ships will land, we ask you to help us exit from this storm better, stronger, and closer to you than when it began, and that you navigate us to a new normal that is far better than the one we left behind, and that you never allow us to forget the lessons we learned along the way. O Lord, grant all of this not just to us, but to our loved ones, our neighbors, our friends, our brothers and sisters throughout the world, and all humanity. O Lord, grant a fast recovery to those who are ill and a safe return to loved ones kept apart. Take special care of the old and vulnerable and those who are mentally unwell. Grant a special solace to those who are living alone, those who are dying alone, and those whose loved ones pass away. Grant a special patience to young children and the adults who are raising them, and grant a special mercy to those who are now locked up with mean, selfish, or abusive people. Grant a special grace to the frontline workers and volunteers upon whom so many depend, especially those who risk their own health to care for ours. And grant a special aid to the needy, to those with few resources, to those struggling to make ends meet, to those working under great pressure, and to those who are striving to make the world a better place. And we especially ask you to please compel our leaders to do what's best for us all. O Lord, you've promised to answer our calls, and you never break your promises, and you are the most generous of those who show generosity. So please answer our call in the most generous of ways, and keep us consistent in making it until we reach safety. And in closing, we ask you to increase your peace and blessings upon our Prophet and upon his family and friends millions of times, and all praise belongs to you. Ameen.
أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا محمد بن عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى ابن عمك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وصي رسول رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى بضعتك الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى زوجتك الوفية الغراء خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى ولديك الإمامين الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أئمة المسلمين من ذرية ولدك الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة ابن الحسن المهدي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا الله من أنصارك وأعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Dear brothers and sisters, this brings to the end of our transmission for tonight. Thank you all for joining. And as we depart here, let us remember all the marhumeens with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Inshallah, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Khuda Hafiz, fi amanillah, and Kwahiri.